Audiobook The Ethereal Bridge by the Third Library. Introduction: The Architect's Vision. A bridge is not merely a structure of wood, steel, or stone. It is a statement of defiance against the void. It declares that two separated realities can be joined, that the chasm of impossibility can be traversed. Every bridge begins as an absurdity, a line drawn across emptiness where no line should exist. The engineer stands at point A, the solid ground of current reality, and gazes across the abyss toward point B, the distant shore of desired reality. Between these 2 points lies nothing but air, gravity, and the mocking laughter of the impossible. Yet the bridge builder does not flinch. They understand something the ordinary observer cannot fathom: the bridge exists before it is built. Consider the nature of impossibility itself. It is not a physical law, but a perceptual boundary. The abyss between who you are and who you wish to become appears impassable only because your 5 senses report the absence of materials. Your eyes scan the void and find no wood. Your hands reach forward and grasp no stone. Your ears hear only the howling wind of probability, declaring your dream unreachable. Logic, that dutiful accountant of the past, reviews your history and concludes the journey cannot be made. Yet there stands the architect, unmoved by the testimony of the senses, preparing to walk out into nothing. Faith, as you have been taught to understand it, is a pale shadow of its true nature. It has been reduced to wishful thinking, a desperate hope that perhaps, maybe, possibly, the universe might grant your petition if you are good enough, if you pray hard enough, if you suffer sufficiently to earn divine favor. This is not faith. This is begging. True faith is the engineering principle that allows the bridge to assemble itself under your feet with each step you take. It is not a request to the cosmos, but a command to the elements. It is not blind hope, but the clearest vision, the ability to perceive the construction materials that exist in a frequency beyond the reach of ordinary sight. The ethereal bridge is the name we give to this invisible structure that carries you from poverty to wealth, from sickness to health, from loneliness to love, from despair to triumph. It is built from substance that cannot be measured by instruments designed for 3-dimensional matter. This substance is denser than steel and more permanent than diamond, yet it passes through the walls of your skepticism like light through glass. The bridge is always under construction, always responding to the blueprint held in your imagination, always ready to solidify beneath your weight if you dare to place your foot upon its invisible planks. This audiobook is the engineering manual you were never given. It contains the specifications, the load calculations, the material properties, and the construction sequence for building bridges where none should exist. You will learn to walk on invisible ground, not through supernatural intervention, but through natural law operating at a level most humans never access. You will discover that the abyss itself is an illusion, a holographic projection designed to keep the timid on the shore. The brave ones, the bridge walkers, know that solid ground extends infinitely in all directions, waiting only for the footfall of faith to materialize it. Every master builder who has crossed from ordinary to extraordinary has used these principles whether they knew the terminology or not. They stepped out when the crowd stepped back. They built when others calculated impossibilities. They walked when others waited for permission. And beneath their feet, invisible to spectators, but undeniable in its support, the ethereal bridge formed and held. The wood appeared plank by plank. The cables tensioned themselves. The towers rose from foundations that existed only in consciousness before manifesting in matter. What observers called miracles were simply engineering projects completed in the frequency of faith. You stand now at point A, whether you acknowledge it or not. Behind you lies everything you have been, every limitation you have accepted, every bridge you refused to build. Before you stretches the abyss and beyond it, point B beckons with the life you desire, the person you wish to become, the reality you dare to claim. The distance appears vast. The crossing seems impossible. Your senses will testify against you. Logic will present its case for remaining where you are. Fear will paint vivid pictures of the fall that awaits if you step forward. Yet within you resides the architect, the engineer, the bridge builder who knows the secret. The bridge is already there. This knowledge is not new. It has been encoded in ancient texts, whispered by mystics, demonstrated by masters, and hidden in plain sight within the most misunderstood verse in spiritual literature. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. These are not poetic metaphors. These are technical specifications. Faith is substance, tangible and load-bearing. It is evidence verifiable and trustworthy. It is the material from which the ethereal bridge is constructed, and you are the builder who commands its assembly. The chapters that follow will strip away the mystification that has surrounded this topic for centuries. We will examine faith not as religious sentiment, but as practical technology. We will explore the mechanics of how desire becomes reality, how imagination hardens into fact, how the invisible becomes visible through principles as reliable as gravity. You will learn to identify the construction materials that exist beyond sensory perception, to place them with precision, to test their strength before committing your full weight, and finally to walk with confidence across spans that defy conventional possibility. Understand this clearly. You are not learning to wish harder or hope better. You are learning to build. The ethereal bridge requires no permission from external authorities, no approval from the visible world, no consensus from those who cannot see what you are constructing. It requires only your willingness to stand at the edge, to extend your foot into apparent nothingness, and to trust that the substance of faith will solidify beneath you. The bridge has never failed a sincere builder. It has only been left unconstructed by those who demanded to see it before they believed in it. The journey from point A to point B is not measured in miles, but in assumptions. Every step is an assumption made manifest. Every plank is a belief given form. Every cable is a knowing that refuses to waver. The construction happens in consciousness first and in matter second, but it happens with absolute certainty if the builder maintains the vision. The architect's most important tool is not the hammer or the saw, but the unwavering internal image of the completed bridge, the finished crossing, the arrival at point B. What follows in these chapters is both ancient wisdom and cutting-edge science, spiritual truth and psychological principle, mystical revelation and practical instruction. The divisions between these categories are artificial. There is only one reality operating at multiple frequencies, and the ethereal bridge is the structure that allows you to navigate between them. You will learn to be both architect and traveler, designer and pedestrian, creator and creation. You will discover that you have always been building bridges, though unconsciously and inconsistently. Now you will build with intention and precision. The void awaits. The destination calls. The bridge responds to your command. Let us begin the construction. Let us learn to walk on invisible ground. Let us traverse the abyss not through magic but through mastery, not through supernatural intervention but through natural law properly understood and deliberately applied. The ethereal bridge is your inheritance, your right, your tool. This manual will teach you to use it. Point A is where you stand. Point B is where you're going. Between them is not emptiness but potential, not absence but latent presence, not void but the construction site of your liberation. The architect within you has been waiting for this moment, for this knowledge, for this permission to build the impossible. The waiting is over. The construction begins now. Step forward. The bridge is forming beneath your feet. Welcome to the engineering school of faith. Welcome to the architecture of the invisible. Welcome to the manual for walking where there is no ground. Welcome to the ethereal bridge. Chapter 1. The substance of things. The word substance has been stripped of its power through casual usage and religious dilution. When someone says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the modern ear hears poetry, metaphor, spiritual encouragement. But the original text uses hypostasis, a term borrowed from architecture and philosophy that meant the foundational reality, the underlying essence, the actual material from which things are constructed. This is not flowery language. This is technical specification. Faith is being identified as the construction material of reality itself, the substrate from which the visible world emerges, the concrete substance that exists before matter and gives rise to matter. Consider the nature of matter as modern physics understands it. Every solid object you perceive, Every wall you touch, every chair that supports your weight, is primarily empty space. The atoms are mostly void, with tiny particles held in patterns by invisible forces. What you experience as solidity is actually energy vibrating at specific frequencies, creating the illusion of density and permanence. The substance is not in the particles themselves, but in the organizing principle that holds them in formation. Faith operates at this same fundamental level, not as a supplement to reality, but as the organizing principle that determines which reality manifests. When the ancient text declares that faith is substance, it is making a scientific claim that predates scientific language. It is asserting that there exists a level of reality more fundamental than the physical, a frequency of existence where form has not yet condensed into matter, but already possesses all the properties of matter. This is not the realm of fantasy or imagination in the dismissive sense. This is pre-matter, the state where your desired reality already exists in full substance, complete and functional, awaiting only the proper conditions to precipitate into the three-dimensional world your senses can detect. You cannot see Wi-Fi signals, yet you trust them to carry your data across space. You do not doubt that your email exists simply because you cannot touch it with your hands or weigh it on a scale. You understand that information can exist in non-physical form and yet produce physical effects, manifesting as words on a screen, images in pixels, transactions in bank accounts. The digital realm has taught you to trust in the reality of the invisible, to accept that presence is not dependent on detection by your five senses. Faith operates on the same principle, but at a more fundamental frequency. The chair you sit upon is less real than the faith that created the possibility of you sitting upon it. The chair will decay, dissolve, return to elemental components. But the principle that organized those components into the pattern called chair is eternal and indestructible. Faith is this organizing principle made conscious and directed. It is the substance that shapes energy into matter according to the blueprint held in imagination. When you exercise faith, you are not hoping that substance will appear. You are working with substance that already exists, molding it with the precision of a sculptor, forming it with the intention of an architect. The error that has cost humanity centuries of mastery is the belief that faith must be directed toward an external power who might grant or deny your request. This misunderstanding reduces you to a beggar and faith to a petition. But if faith is substance, then you are not asking for something. You are building with something. The substance is in your possession already. The material is at hand. The question is not whether the universe will provide what you need, but whether you will recognize that you already hold the construction materials for anything you wish to create. Examine your desired reality, whatever it may be. Wealth, health, love, success, freedom, any destination across the abyss. In the visible world, this reality does not yet exist for you. Your bank account shows different numbers, your body exhibits different symptoms, your relationship status reflects a different truth. The three-dimensional world testifies against your desire. But in the realm of substance, in the frequency of pre-matter, your desired reality exists as completely as your current reality. It has weight, density, presence. It lacks only the final step of precipitation into physical form. This is where most people abandon the construction project. They check the visible world, see no evidence, and conclude the substance does not exist. But this is like checking for Wi-Fi with your hands and concluding there is no signal because you cannot touch it. You are using the wrong instrument of measurement. Faith is substance, but it is not physical substance. It exists at a frequency that precedes physicality, and it requires a different sense to detect it. You do not perceive Wi-Fi with your eyes. You perceive it with a device calibrated to its frequency. You do not perceive faith substance with your physical senses. You perceive it with consciousness calibrated to its frequency. The calibration is the challenge. Your consciousness has been trained from birth to trust only what the five senses report. You have been conditioned to treat the invisible as the unreal, to dismiss the unseen as the non-existent. This conditioning must be reversed. You must retrain your awareness to recognize that the substance of faith is more reliable than the appearance of matter, more permanent than the testimony of the senses, more trustworthy than the consensus of the crowd. The substance is there. It has always been there. It is simply vibrating at a frequency most people never learn to detect. When you hold an image in your imagination and sustain it with feeling and attention, you are not daydreaming. You are working with substance. You are shaping pre-matter. You are forming the mold into which physical reality will pour itself. The image is not a wish, it is a blueprint. The feeling is not hope, it is the energy that animates the substance. The attention is not fantasy, it is the hand of the sculptor molding the clay of creation. Every moment you spend in the imaginal act, you are building with substance as real as concrete, as tangible as steel, as permanent as stone. The visible world is a lagging indicator of the invisible world. What you see around you today is the materialization of the substance you shaped yesterday, last week, last year. The delay between shaping and manifestation creates the illusion that the invisible is ineffective, that the substance of faith is somehow less reliable than the substance of matter. But the delay is merely the time required for precipitation, for the high-frequency pattern to step down into low-frequency form. The substance never fails. It always manifests according to the pattern held in consciousness. The question is only what pattern you are holding. Most people shape substance unconsciously, defaulting to the patterns absorbed from their environment, inherited from their history, imposed by their culture. They wonder why their life follows the same trajectories as those around them, never realizing they are building with borrowed blueprints, constructing from inherited designs, shaping substance according to consensus reality. But the substance itself is neutral. It responds to any pattern held with sufficient intensity and duration. It will build a prison as readily as a palace, will construct poverty as easily as wealth, will manifest sickness as surely as health. The substance does not judge your pattern, it simply obeys it. This is the great secret hidden in the statement, "Faith is the substance of things hoped for." You are not hoping that substance will appear, you are recognizing that substance is present, that it is responsive to your consciousness, that it awaits your command. The chair you sit on is not more real than the wealth you desire. Both are patterns held in the substance of faith. One has completed its precipitation into matter. The other is still forming in the invisible realm. But both are equally real in the dimension of substance. Both exist with equal certainty in the frequency where faith operates. The practical implication is revolutionary. You do not need to acquire substance. You need to recognize the substance you already possess and shape it according to your desired pattern. You do not need permission from the external world. The substance responds to internal command. You do not need to overcome obstacles in the physical dimension. You need only to hold the pattern clearly in the dimension of substance, and the physical will rearrange itself to match. This is not metaphysics in the airy sense. This is mechanics in the precise sense. This is engineering at the fundamental level of creation. When you understand that faith is substance, you stop begging and start building. You stop hoping and start shaping. You stop waiting for the universe to grant your wish and start commanding the substance to assume your chosen form. The power is not in the heavens waiting to descend. The power is in your consciousness waiting to be directed. The substance is not absent waiting to be delivered. The substance is present waiting to be molded. You are not a supplicant before an external authority. You are an architect with unlimited building materials. The Ethereal Bridge is built from this substance. Every plank, every cable, every support beam is shaped from faith substance, from pre-matter that exists in the invisible frequency. When you step onto the bridge, you are not stepping onto nothing. You are stepping onto substance. The fact that your physical eyes cannot see it does not diminish its reality. The fact that your physical hands cannot touch it does not reduce its strength. The substance of faith is denser than steel, more enduring than diamond, more reliable than the ground beneath your feet. It is the foundation of all that exists, the material from which worlds are built, the concrete reality that precedes and produces physical matter. This chapter has one purpose: to establish beyond doubt that faith is not a feeling but a substance, not a sentiment but a material, not a hope but a building block. Everything that follows depends on this understanding. If you continue to think of faith as wishful thinking, You will remain on the shore of point A, afraid to step onto a bridge you believe is imaginary. But if you grasp that faith is substance as real as the page before you, as tangible as the air in your lungs, as present as the beat of your heart, then you are ready to learn the engineering principles that govern its use. You are ready to build the bridge. You are ready to walk on invisible ground. You are ready to traverse the abyss on substance that has never failed a builder who understood its nature. Faith is substance. This is not poetry. This is physics. This is not metaphor. This is mechanics. This is not spiritual sentiment. This is scientific fact. The substance exists. The material is at hand. The construction can begin. You are not waiting for faith to arrive. You are learning to use the faith substance that permeates all space, responds to all consciousness, and awaits your command to assume the form of your chosen reality. The chair is not more real than your dream. Both are patterns in substance. One you can see, the other you are learning to see. But seeing is a skill that can be developed, a sense that can be trained, a perception that can be calibrated to detect the frequencies where faith substance dwells. You are not learning to believe harder. You are learning to see what has always been there. Chapter 2. The Sixth Sense. Human beings navigate the three-dimensional world through 5 biological senses: sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. These are your interfaces with physical reality, your data-gathering instruments for the material plane. They are exquisitely calibrated to detect energy within specific frequency ranges. Electromagnetic waves that become light and color, vibrations in air that become sound, chemical signatures that become flavor and scent, pressure and temperature variations that become touch. These 5 senses are not detecting reality itself, but rather a narrow bandwidth of reality, a small slice of the electromagnetic spectrum, a limited range of vibrations. You are essentially blind and deaf to most of what exists. Consider the light spectrum. Your eyes detect wavelengths between approximately 390 and 700 nanometers. This is called visible light, but the name is deceptive. It is only visible to your particular biological senses. Infrared radiation exists below this range, ultraviolet above it. And beyond these lie radio waves, microwaves, X-rays, gamma rays, all of them real, all of them carrying information, all of them completely invisible to your naked eyes. A snake with heat-sensing organs perceives infrared that you cannot see. A bee perceives ultraviolet patterns on flowers that are entirely hidden from your view. Your perception is not reality itself, but a filtered, translated, radically incomplete version of reality. The same limitation applies to your other senses. You hear sounds between roughly 20 and 20,000 hertz, but dogs hear frequencies up to 60,000 hertz, and whales communicate using infrasound below the range of human perception. Reality is full of sounds you cannot detect, vibrations that pass through your awareness without registering. Your senses create the illusion of completeness, the false confidence that if you cannot sense something, it must not exist. This is the great limitation that keeps most humans trapped in consensus reality, unable to perceive the fuller spectrum of existence where the ethereal bridge becomes visible. Faith is the sixth sense, the biological spiritual organ that detects reality in the fourth dimension and beyond. Just as your eyes are calibrated to detect light and your ears are calibrated to detect sound, faith is calibrated to detect prematter, to sense the substance that exists before it precipitates into physical form. This is not mystical exaggeration, but functional description. Faith perceives what is there but not yet visible, detects what is real but not yet material, senses the bridge that exists in the frequency your physical eyes cannot access. Without this sixth sense, you are functionally blind in the dimension where creation occurs. The dimension where faith operates is not spatially separate from your physical location, but vibrationally distinct from your physical perception. You are standing simultaneously in multiple frequencies, multiple layers of reality, multiple dimensions of existence. Your physical body occupies the three-dimensional space. Your consciousness occupies the fourth-dimensional space, where time becomes malleable and future present. Past exists as a single field. Your imagination occupies the fifth-dimensional space, where all possibilities exist simultaneously. Faith is the sense organ that allows you to navigate these higher dimensions, to extract patterns from the field of infinite potential, and to impress those patterns onto the substance that will manifest them in the physical. Most people are spiritually blind because they have never trained their sixth sense. They are like individuals who have eyes but have never learned to focus them, who have ears but have never learned to distinguish signal from noise. The organ is present. Every human being possesses the capacity for faith, but it remains dormant, uncalibrated, untrained. And because they cannot perceive what faith perceives, they conclude that only the physical is real, that only what the five senses detect has actual existence. They are blind people declaring that light does not exist because they cannot see it. The training of faith as a sense organ follows the same principles as the training of any sense. You must learn to distinguish signal from noise, to focus attention on specific frequencies, to interpret the data being received, to trust the information even when it contradicts the testimony of your other senses. A musician trains their ear to detect subtle differences in pitch and tone that untrained listeners cannot perceive. A sommelier trains their palate to identify flavors and aromas that casual drinkers miss entirely. A painter trains their eye to see colors and values that non-artists overlook. Faith requires the same disciplined development, the same patient practice, the same willingness to trust the sense even when others insist there is nothing there to sense. When faith is properly developed, it perceives with absolute clarity what the five senses cannot detect. It sees the wealth when the eyes see poverty, not through delusion or denial, but through access to a higher frequency, where the wealth already exists in substance. It feels the health when the body feels pain, not through disassociation from physical sensation, but through connection to a dimension where perfect health is the foundational pattern. It knows the success when circumstances suggest failure, not through blind optimism, but through perception of the completed bridge that already spans the abyss in the realm of pre-matter. The conflict between the five senses and the sixth sense is the central drama of human existence. Your physical senses report one reality, your sixth sense perceives another. Your eyes say, "You are poor." Your faith says, "You are wealthy." Your body says, "You are sick." Your faith says, "You are well." Your circumstances say you have failed. Your faith says you have succeeded. Most people resolve this conflict by trusting the five senses and dismissing the sixth, by believing what they can see and rejecting what they can only sense through faith. This is a choice, not an inevitability, and it is a choice that determines whether you remain at point A or cross to point B. The testimony of the five senses is always historical. They report what has already manifested, what has already condensed into physical form, what is already complete in the three-dimensional world. They are reading instruments that tell you about the past pattern, the previous construction, the reality that you or others shaped yesterday. Faith, by contrast, reads the current pattern, the construction in progress, the reality that is forming now in the invisible dimension. Faith is the only sense that operates in real time at the level of causation. It perceives the cause before the effect, the substance before the matter, the bridge before it solidifies beneath your feet. This is why faith often appears to contradict common sense. Common sense is the accumulated testimony of the five senses, the consensus interpretation of physical reality, the agreement about what is real based on what can be collectively perceived. But common sense is always looking backward, always describing what was, always missing what is forming. Faith looks forward, sees what is becoming, perceives the pattern that is assembling. The person who trusts only common sense is like a driver who navigates by looking in the rearview mirror. Technically possible, but practically insane. Faith is the windshield through which you see the road ahead. The development of faith as a functional sixth sense requires deliberate practice. You must learn to quiet the loud voices of the five physical senses long enough to hear the subtle whisper of the sixth. You must learn to hold an inner perception, steady even when outer perception contradicts it. You must learn to feel the substance of things not yet seen, to sense the weight of the bridge before your foot touches it, to detect the presence of your desired reality in the invisible frequency where it already exists, complete and perfect. This is not self-deception. but self-revelation, not fantasy but heightened perception, not ignoring reality, but perceiving reality at a deeper level than the physical senses can access. Consider how you would train any new sense. If you suddenly developed the ability to perceive ultraviolet light, you would at first be overwhelmed by the unfamiliar input, unsure how to interpret the new data, uncertain whether to trust these strange new signals. You would need to practice focusing this new sense, to learn what the new perceptions mean, to develop confidence in the accuracy of the information being received. The same process applies to faith. Initially, what you perceive through faith will seem less real than what you perceive through physical senses, because you have a lifetime of practice trusting the physical and almost no practice trusting the spiritual. But with consistent use, with deliberate calibration, with disciplined attention, the sixth sense becomes as reliable and trustworthy as any of the five. The masters who have walked on invisible ground, who have crossed impossible chasms, who have manifested realities that defied all physical probability, are not gifted with special powers. They have simply developed their sixth sense to a high degree of precision. They perceive substance where others see only air. They detect the bridge where others see only the abyss. They sense the completion where others see only the impossibility. And because they trust what they sense through faith more than what they see through eyes, they act with certainty, they move with confidence, they build with precision. The bridge solidifies beneath them not because they are special, but because they are using all six senses instead of only five. You are not learning to see something that is not there. You are learning to see something that is there but invisible to your current level of perception. The infrared light existed before you developed instruments to detect it. The radio waves existed before you built receivers to capture them. The fourth-dimensional substance exists right now in your present location, permeating the space you occupy, responsive to your consciousness, awaiting your command. Faith is the instrument that allows you to detect it, the receiver that allows you to capture it, the sense organ that allows you to perceive it. Without this sixth sense, you are navigating reality with missing information, building bridges while blind to the construction materials, attempting to cross the abyss without the ability to see where to place your feet. The question is not whether the substance exists. The question is whether you will develop the sense to perceive it. The question is not whether the bridge is real. The question is whether you will train the organ that allows you to see it. The question is not whether you can cross the abyss. The question is whether you will trust the sixth sense that detects solid ground where the five senses detect only empty air. Five senses give you the past. The sixth sense gives you the future. Five senses describe what has been built. The sixth sense shows you what is being built. Five senses are essential for navigating the physical world. The sixth sense is essential for creating it. Chapter 3. The enemy called logic. Logic is humanity's crowning intellectual achievement and its greatest spiritual trap. It is the system of reasoning that allowed civilization to advance from superstition to science, from chaos to order, from guesswork to prediction. Logic takes observable data, identifies patterns, establishes rules, and creates frameworks for understanding cause and effect. It is the tool that built your computer, designed your medicines, engineered your buildings, and decoded the human genome. Logic is magnificent, powerful, and absolutely reliable within its domain. The problem is that its domain is the past, and the ethereal bridge extends into the future. Logic operates by analyzing what has already happened and extrapolating forward based on established patterns. It observes that the sun has risen every morning for billions of days and concludes the sun will rise tomorrow. This conclusion is reasonable and probably correct within the three-dimensional timeline you inhabit. But notice the mechanism. Logic can only compute the repetition of known patterns. It cannot compute the emergence of genuinely new patterns. It cannot process the unprecedented. It has no category for the bridge that was not there yesterday, but will be there tomorrow, because you are building it in the invisible dimension. When you approach logic with a desire that defies your current circumstances, logic becomes a prosecuting attorney, presenting the case against your dream. It reviews your history and finds no evidence that you have achieved this before. It examines your current resources and finds them insufficient for the goal. It surveys your education, your connections, your credentials, and files a brief explaining why the desired reality is improbable or impossible. Logic is not lying. Within its framework of analysis, which is retrospective and limited to the already manifested, its conclusions are sound. The problem is that the framework itself is inadequate for the task of crossing the abyss. If you ask logic, "Can I become wealthy?" it will consult your financial history, your current income, your spending patterns, your debt levels, and your savings rate. Based on this data, it will calculate trajectories and produce probabilities. For most people, logic will answer no or not significantly, or not without extraordinary effort and luck. This answer is accurate within the closed system of historical patterns, but the question itself is wrong. You should not be asking logic about possibilities. You should be using faith to perceive actualities that exist in a dimension logic cannot access. Logic is a servant, not a master. It is a tool for organizing information in the physical dimension, not an oracle for determining what is possible in the creative dimension. When you allow logic to become master, you imprison yourself in the patterns of your past. You become unable to create anything genuinely new, because logic declares that only the already created can exist. This is the great limitation that keeps the majority of humanity recycling the same circumstances generation after generation, building only what has been built before, manifesting only variations of what has already manifested. The logical mind analyzes data from the 5 physical senses and creates its models of reality from that limited input. Since the 5 senses perceive only the already manifested, logic becomes a closed loop that endlessly describes what is without ever accessing what could be. It is like a computer program that can only rearrange existing data but can never generate new information. The program is perfect within its parameters, but the parameters themselves are the prison. Faith operates outside these parameters, accessing data from the 6th sense, perceiving substance in the realm where new patterns are forming, where unprecedented realities are assembling, where your bridge is being constructed. Consider the nature of breakthrough innovations in any field. The Wright brothers achieved powered flight, despite logic presenting overwhelming evidence that heavier-than-air machines could not fly. Experts had calculated the impossibility using sound logical principles based on existing data. They were right within the framework of what had been attempted and failed. But the Wright brothers accessed something beyond logic, a perception of a pattern that did not yet exist in physical reality, but existed completely in the realm of possibility. They used logic as a servant to refine their design, but they did not allow logic to be the master, determining whether the goal was achievable. The enemy is not logic itself, but the tyranny of logic, the elevation of logical analysis to the position of ultimate arbiter of reality. When logic occupies this throne, it becomes a dictator that executes every dream that cannot present papers proving it has already been achieved. It demands proof before permission, evidence before attempt, manifestation before belief. But this inverts the creative sequence. The Ethereal Bridge requires belief before manifestation, attempt before proof, permission granted to yourself regardless of evidence. Logic wants the bridge visible before you step onto it. Faith steps onto the bridge knowing it will become visible. The conflict between logic and faith is most intense at the beginning of any crossing, when the gap between current reality and desired reality is at its widest. Logic surveys the abyss and declares the span unbridgeable. It calculates the distance, measures your resources, reviews your capabilities, and files its report. Insufficient materials, inadequate experience, improbable success. This report is not wrong about the physical inventory. You may indeed lack the physical resources that logic deems necessary, but logic cannot perceive the faith substance you possess in unlimited quantity, cannot measure the pre-matter that responds to your imagination, cannot calculate the support capacity of the ethereal bridge. The practical challenge is learning to silence logic at the crucial moment without dismissing it entirely. Logic is useful for the detail work of manifestation. Once you have perceived the desired reality through faith, Logic can help you organize the steps, refine the approach, optimize the execution. But logic must not be allowed to vote on whether the crossing is possible. That decision comes from faith alone. Logic looks down at the abyss and sees the fall. Faith looks forward at the destination and sees the path. Both are looking at the same situation, but logic is using the wrong sense organ for the task at hand. The person who is dominated by logic becomes a prisoner of their circumstances. Since logic can only work with existing data, and existing data reflects past creations, the logical person is forever confined to the reality they have already built. They become trapped in circular reasoning. I don't have wealth because I've never had wealth, and I've never had wealth because I don't have the resources to acquire wealth, and I don't have the resources because I don't have wealth. This loop is logically sound and spiritually fatal. It is the voice that keeps millions of people on the shore of Point A, afraid to step onto a bridge their logic cannot compute. Breaking the tyranny of logic requires a conscious decision to trust perception over analysis, to value the data from your sixth sense more highly than the data from your 5 physical senses, to act on faith perception even when logic screams warnings. This feels dangerous because you have been trained since childhood to trust logic above all else, to dismiss as foolish anything that cannot be proven logically. But the masters of manifestation, the walkers on invisible ground, the crossers of impossible chasms, are precisely those who learned to subordinate logic to faith, to use analysis as a tool while receiving direction from vision. The test comes in the form of a question that logic cannot answer. When you stand at the edge of your current reality, preparing to step toward your desired reality, logic will demand, where is the bridge? The only answer that serves you is, the bridge is in the dimension of substance, solid and complete, awaiting my footfall to make it visible. Logic will reject this answer as nonsense, as wishful thinking, as dangerous delusion. Logic will present case studies of those who stepped forward and fell, who trusted and failed, who believed and were disappointed. Logic will be compelling and articulate and absolutely convinced of its correctness, and you must thank logic for its service and step forward anyway. You must acknowledge that logic has accurately described the past and then inform it that you are not building from the past, but from the future, not working with already manifested resources, but with pre-matter, not constrained by historical patterns, but liberated by faith perception. Logic will continue to object, but its objections will fade as you move forward, as the bridge solidifies beneath you, as what logic declared impossible becomes undeniably manifest. Logic will eventually accept the new data, incorporate the new pattern, and describe your success as inevitable, conveniently forgetting that it argued strenuously against the attempt. The great irony is that logic is not your enemy at all. It is a faithful servant that has been promoted beyond its competence, asked to perform tasks it was never designed to handle, elevated to a position of authority it should never occupy. In its proper role, logic is invaluable. In the role of master, logic is paralyzing. The bridge builder uses logic to calculate load capacities after perceiving through faith that the bridge exists. The bridge builder does not ask logic whether the bridge is possible. That question is answered by faith alone, by the sixth sense that perceives substance where logic perceives only void, that detects solid ground where analysis finds only air, that sees the completed structure where reason sees only impossibility. Logic describes the known. Faith perceives the emerging. Both are necessary. Neither is sufficient alone. But when they conflict, faith must lead and logic must follow, because creation moves from invisible to visible, from future to present, from the fourth dimension into the third. Chapter 4. The Law of Reversibility. There exists a mechanical principle in physics that operates with absolute consistency. Any process that can run forward can also run backward. If heat produces motion, then motion can produce heat. If pressure creates electricity, then electricity can create pressure. If a cause generates an effect through a specific mechanism, then generating that effect through the same mechanism will produce the corresponding cause. This is not philosophy but engineering, not spiritual wisdom but physical law. And this law, when understood properly, becomes the master key to conscious creation. In the three-dimensional world, causation appears to flow in one direction, from cause to effect, from action to result, from input to output. You see someone who is wealthy and observe that they feel secure, confident, generous. The logical mind concludes, wealth causes these feelings. You see someone who is healthy and observe that they feel energetic, vibrant, alive. The logical mind concludes, health causes these feelings. You see someone who is successful and observe that they feel worthy, capable, significant. The logical mind concludes, success causes these feelings. These conclusions are correct but incomplete. They describe only half of the mechanism. The law of reversibility states that if the fact of being wealthy produces the feeling of security, then generating the feeling of security must produce the fact of wealth. If the fact of health produces the feeling of vitality, then generating the feeling of vitality must produce the fact of health. The mechanism works in both directions with equal reliability. Cause produces effect, and effect produces cause. The system is reversible. This is not a metaphysical claim requiring faith to accept. This is a mechanical principle observable in every domain of existence: heat and motion, pressure and electricity, magnetic fields and electric current. Every reciprocal relationship in physics demonstrates this reversibility. But the human mind, trained to perceive linearly, to think sequentially, to imagine causation as a one-way street, struggles to grasp the implications. You believe you must first acquire the wealth before you can feel secure. You believe you must first achieve the health before you can feel vital. You believe you must first obtain the success before you can feel worthy. This belief inverts the actual mechanism of creation. It places you in the position of waiting for external circumstances to change before allowing internal states to shift. And because your internal state determines what you create, this waiting ensures that nothing changes. Consider the practical application. If you examine someone who possesses the reality you desire, you will observe that they inhabit a specific feeling state. The wealthy person feels wealthy, not because they think about their money constantly, but because there is a baseline sense of security, of sufficiency, of havingness that colors their perception. The healthy person feels healthy, a sense of vitality, energy, well-being that is their default state. The successful person feels successful, a confidence, a worthiness, a knowing that they belong at the level they occupy. These feelings are not the result of their circumstances. These feelings are the cause of their circumstances. The reversal happens when you recognize that you can generate the feeling without waiting for the fact. You can feel secure without seeing money in your account. You can feel vital without seeing perfect health in your body. You can feel worthy without seeing success in your circumstances. This is not self-deception or denial of current reality. This is accessing the mechanism of creation at its point of leverage. You are using the law of reversibility to produce the cause by generating the effect. You are running the mechanism backward to change the output by changing the input. The resistance to this understanding is immediate and visceral. The logical mind protests, "But I don't have the money, so how can I feel secure?" The answer is that security is not produced by money. Security is produced by a decision to feel secure. Money is one of many possible external confirmations of an internal state, but it is not the source of that state. If security came from money, then everyone with money would feel secure, and everyone without money would feel insecure. But observation reveals that security is independent of amount. Some people feel secure with modest resources, others feel anxious despite vast wealth. The feeling does not come from the external fact. The external fact comes from the internal feeling. This is where the ethereal bridge becomes practical engineering rather than mystical aspiration. When you stand at point A desiring to reach point B, you observe that at point B you would feel a certain way. The conventional approach is to attempt the crossing while feeling the way you feel at point A. Lacking, striving, insufficient, incomplete. But you cannot build a bridge to wealth while feeling poor. You cannot construct a path to health while feeling sick. You cannot create a crossing to success while feeling like a failure. The feelings are the substance from which the bridge is built. The wrong feelings create the wrong bridge, leading back to point A even as you attempt to move toward point B. The law of reversibility instructs you to reverse the sequence. Instead of waiting to feel the desired state until you reach the desired reality, you generate the desired state now and allow it to produce the desired reality. You do not feel wealthy after you acquire money. You feel wealthy and the feeling produces the money. You do not feel healthy after your body heals. You feel healthy and the feeling produces the healing. The feeling is not the reward for achieving the goal. The feeling is the mechanism that achieves the goal. This requires a level of consciousness that most people never develop. It requires the ability to maintain an internal state, independent of external confirmation. It requires the capacity to feel successful while circumstances scream failure, to feel prosperous while the bank account shows poverty, to feel healthy while the body exhibits disease. This is not delusion. This is mastery. You are operating the creative mechanism deliberately instead of accidentally, consciously instead of unconsciously, from the inside out instead of from the outside in. The practical method is to identify the feeling state that corresponds to your desired reality and to practice generating that state, independent of external circumstances. If you desire wealth, you must discover what wealth feels like. Not the fantasy of luxury, but the actual texture of sufficiency, security, freedom from financial anxiety. Then you must learn to access that feeling without needing to see money, to maintain that state even when bills arrive, to dwell in that frequency even when logic presents evidence of lack. This is the work. This is the construction of the bridge. Every moment spent in the feeling of the wish fulfilled is a plank placed in the invisible structure. The law of reversibility explains why affirmations often fail and why visualization sometimes produces results. Affirmations that repeat words without generating corresponding feelings are useless because words alone do not engage the creative mechanism. You can repeat "I am wealthy" 1,000 times, but if the feeling beneath the words is "I am lying to myself," you are building a bridge to more lying, more pretense, more internal conflict. Visualization works only when it generates the feeling of the wish fulfilled. If you visualize wealth but feel longing or lack, you are creating more longing and lack. The image is not the power. The feeling generated by the image is the power. The reversal is complete when you realize that you are not trying to attract your desired reality from outside yourself. You are trying to become your desired reality from inside yourself. The wealthy person is not someone who has money. The wealthy person is someone who feels wealthy. The having follows the being. The external reflects the internal. Money is not wealth, it is evidence of wealth. Health is not vitality, it is evidence of vitality. Success is not worthiness, it is evidence of worthiness. You are working with the cause, not chasing the effect. You are shaping the substance, not pursuing the shadow. The law of reversibility is the reason faith works. Faith is not hoping that something will happen. Faith is feeling as though it has happened. Faith is dwelling in the end result, occupying the desired state, living from the conclusion instead of toward it. When you feel wealthy, you are wealthy in the dimension of substance, and the three-dimensional world must eventually reflect what is true in the four-dimensional world. When you feel healthy, you are healthy in the realm of pre-matter, and the physical body must eventually conform to the pattern held in consciousness. When you feel successful, you are successful in the frequency of faith, and circumstances must rearrange themselves to match the internal reality. This is not gradual work, where you slowly accumulate feelings until you reach a threshold. This is instantaneous transformation, where you decide to occupy the desired state now and maintain it until it manifests. The decision is binary. Either you are generating the feeling of the wish fulfilled, or you are not. Either you are building the bridge from faith substance, or you are waiting for the bridge to appear. Either you are using the law of reversibility to create cause from effect, or you are remaining trapped in the linear model where effect must wait for cause. The practical test is simple. Can you feel prosperous when your bank account shows poverty? Can you feel healthy when your body shows symptoms? Can you feel successful when your circumstances show failure? If you cannot, you are still believing that external facts create internal states. If you can, you have reversed the mechanism and begun to create consciously. The bridge is built from feeling. The substance of faith takes the shape of your emotional state. You are not walking on nothing. You are walking on the solidified feeling of your wish fulfilled, and that substance is more reliable than concrete, more enduring than steel, more trustworthy than the ground beneath your feet. Chapter 5. Walking on Water. The image of walking on water is the ultimate metaphor for faith in action, the picture that captures the essence of what it means to act against all sensory evidence. Water has properties known to every human being. It is liquid, it flows, it has no structural integrity, it cannot support weight. These properties are not opinions, but measurable facts. If you step onto water, you will sink. This is not a religious teaching, but a physical law. Yet the metaphor persists because it captures a deeper truth. What appears impossible to the five senses becomes achievable to the sixth when you treat the substance of faith as more solid than the substance of matter. To walk on water, you must convince your consciousness that the water is stone. Not hope that it might become stone, not wish that it could be stone, but perceive it as stone with such complete certainty that your body responds to the perception rather than to the physical properties of the liquid. This is the key that unlocks all impossible crossings. Your body and your circumstances respond not to objective reality, but to your perception of reality. If you perceive the water as water, you will sink through it. If you perceive the water as stone, you will stand upon it. The substance itself is neutral. It takes its form from your conviction. This is not merely psychological, but quantum mechanical. At the deepest level of physical reality, matter is not fixed but probabilistic. Particles exist in states of superposition until observation collapses them into specific configurations. The observer effect demonstrates that consciousness plays a role in determining which potential reality manifests from the field of possibilities. You are not observing a fixed reality and adapting to it. You are collapsing probability fields into specific configurations through the act of observation, through the quality of your consciousness, through the certainty of your perception. When you look at water and see stone, you are not hallucinating. You are selecting a reality from the quantum field. The practical application requires understanding the nature of sustained assumption. An assumption is a perception held without external proof, a knowing that operates independent of sensory confirmation. When you assume something, you treat it as true before evidence appears. Most assumptions are unconscious. You assume the floor will support you, so you walk without testing each step. You assume the chair is solid, so you sit without hesitation. These assumptions are based on repeated experience, on conditioning, on the accumulated testimony of your senses. But assumptions can be created consciously, deliberately, in direct contradiction to sensory evidence. The master who walks on water has cultivated an assumption that faith substance is solid. This is not a momentary thought, but a sustained state of consciousness, a baseline perception that does not waver when circumstances challenge it. When they look at the water, they do not see water as you see it. They see a substance that responds to faith, a material that hardens under conviction, a medium that obeys consciousness. This perception is so complete, so unwavering, so thoroughly integrated into their model of reality that their body acts accordingly. They step onto the water as you would step onto stone, with the same confidence, the same certainty, the same lack of doubt. The moment doubt enters, the assumption collapses. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. It is checking to see if faith is working. It is testing the water to confirm whether it's really stone. And the instant you test it, the instant you allow your consciousness to entertain the possibility that it might be water after all, you have collapsed the assumption back into consensus reality. The water becomes water again. The stone reverts to liquid. You sink not because faith failed, but because you withdrew faith. The substance responds to your current conviction, not your past conviction. It is dynamic, always matching your present state of consciousness. This is why most people cannot walk on water, cannot build the ethereal bridge, cannot cross the impossible abyss. They begin with faith, take a step, then check to see if it's working. The checking is the leak in the boat. The testing is the crack in the foundation. The verification is the withdrawal of the very force that made the crossing possible. You cannot walk on water while simultaneously verifying that it's water. You cannot build a bridge from faith while simultaneously confirming that there is no bridge. The act of checking assumes that the evidence precedes the reality, that the physical must confirm the invisible. But the sequence is reversed. The invisible must be held until it becomes physical. The assumption must be sustained until it manifests. Consider the story of Peter walking on water toward Jesus. He steps out of the boat successfully. The water holds him. He takes several steps. Then he looks down, sees the waves, recognizes the impossibility of what he's doing and begins to sink. The water did not change. His perception changed. His assumption collapsed. He shifted from operating through faith to operating through logic, from responding to the sixth sense to responding to the five physical senses. The moment he checked the substance beneath him, the moment he allowed doubt to inspect his footing, he was no longer walking on the assumption that the water was stone. He was falling through the realization that the water was liquid. The sustained assumption is the difference between dabbling in faith and mastering it. Dabbling is trying faith when it's convenient, when circumstances are favorable, when success seems likely. Mastery is maintaining faith when circumstances contradict it, when logic argues against it, when every sense screams that you should stop. The bridge is built from sustained assumption, not momentary belief. You do not step onto the ethereal bridge for an instant and then check to see if it's real. You step onto it and keep walking, maintaining the assumption that it's solid regardless of what your senses report, holding the perception that it's supporting you despite any evidence to the contrary. This creates a paradox that confuses most seekers. How can you maintain an assumption that contradicts observable facts without being delusional? How do you hold the perception of health when your body shows disease, wealth when your account shows poverty, success when your circumstances show failure? The answer is that you are not denying the physical facts, you are subordinating them to the higher facts. The physical dimension is the effect, the consciousness dimension is the cause. You acknowledge what the senses report, while maintaining that the report is about the past pattern, the previous construction, the reality that you are now replacing with a new pattern, a new construction, a new reality. The water walker does not deny that they are standing on H2O. They affirm that consciousness can restructure H2O, that faith can reorganize molecular bonds, that sustained assumption can alter physical properties. This sounds mystical until you remember that human consciousness already does this constantly. Your beliefs about your body affect its chemistry. Your perception of a situation affects its outcome. Your assumptions about people influence their behavior toward you. Consciousness shapes matter continuously. The only question is whether you shape it accidentally or intentionally, unconsciously or deliberately, by default or by design. The technique of sustained assumption requires practice, like any skill. You begin with small impossibilities, minor contradictions between desired reality and current circumstances. You practice holding the assumption that you are well when you have a headache, that you are prosperous when you lack money for a purchase, that you are successful when you experience a setback. You maintain these assumptions not through gritting your teeth and ignoring reality, but through genuinely perceiving the higher reality that exists in the dimension of substance. You train yourself to sense with your sixth sense more reliably than you see with your physical eyes. As you practice, the assumptions become easier to maintain. The water begins to feel more solid. The bridge becomes more evident. The gap between desired reality and manifested reality shrinks not because circumstances change first, but because your perception changes first and circumstances follow. You are not waiting for the water to become stone before you step on it. You are treating it as stone, and your treatment causes it to respond as stone. The cause is always consciousness. The effect is always circumstances. The sequence is always internal reality first, external reality second. Sustained assumption is the bridge between the two. The ultimate test comes when you face a situation where every sense, every authority, every expert, every logical calculation declares that what you desire is impossible. This is the storm, the waves, the crisis that makes most people retreat to the boat of consensus reality. But the master sees the storm differently. They see it as the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that faith substance is more solid than water, that sustained assumption is more powerful than physical law, that consciousness is more causative than circumstances. They step out not because they are foolish, but because they have trained their sixth sense to perceive what the five senses cannot detect, the solid ground of faith that exists beneath all apparent impossibility. You will not walk on water by trying harder. You will walk on water by assuming more completely. The effort is not physical but perceptual. You are not attempting to defy gravity. You are perceiving a reality where gravity does not apply because the substance has changed. The water is stone because you say it's stone and maintain that saying regardless of contradiction. This is not arrogance but authority, not delusion but mastery, not wishful thinking but deliberate creation. You are not hoping the water will hold you. You are commanding it to hold you through the sustained assumption that it must, it does, it always was solid, beneath the illusion of liquidity. The ethereal bridge is walked the same way. You do not tentatively test each step, checking to see if the substance will hold before committing your weight. You walk with the confidence of someone who knows the bridge is there, who perceives it with their sixth sense, even though their five senses report only air. Each step is an assumption sustained. Each stride is a conviction maintained. Each crossing is a demonstration that consciousness creates reality, that sustained assumption produces manifestation, that faith substance is more reliable than physical matter. Walk on the water. The stone is there beneath the waves, waiting for your assumption to reveal it. Chapter 6. The Vacuum of Doubt. Doubt is not the absence of faith, but the presence of inverted faith, not a neutral emptiness, but an active force working against your desired reality. When you doubt, you are not simply failing to believe. You are actively believing in the opposite outcome, directing your creative power toward the manifestation of what you fear rather than what you desire. Doubt is faith in the negative, the same mechanism operating in reverse, the same substance being shaped into the form of failure instead of success. And because faith substance responds equally to all forms of conviction, doubt creates as powerfully as faith. It simply creates what you do not want. The architecture of doubt reveals its nature. When you doubt your ability to become wealthy, you are not withholding judgment about your financial future. You are actively visualizing poverty, feeling the texture of lack, rehearsing the experience of insufficiency. Your imagination is engaged, your emotions are activated, your consciousness is focused. All the elements of creation are present. The only difference is the direction. You are building a bridge to poverty instead of wealth, constructing a path to failure instead of success, shaping substance into the form of your fear instead of your desire. The creative power is the same. The results are opposite. Doubt enters through the practice of checking your work, of verifying that your faith is producing results, of looking for evidence that the bridge is forming. This seems reasonable. You want confirmation that your efforts are working. But the act of checking assumes that the visible world must change before the invisible world is real. It inverts the sequence of creation. It treats the three-dimensional manifestation as the cause and the four-dimensional substance as the effect. And when you check and find no evidence, when you inspect and see no change, when you verify and confirm no progress, you introduce doubt. The gap between desired reality and current circumstances becomes proof that faith is not working. But faith was working. The bridge was forming. The substance was shaping itself according to your sustained assumption. And then you stopped sustaining the assumption long enough to check whether it was working. In that moment of checking, you shifted from creating to evaluating, from building to inspecting, from assuming to testing. And the test itself is doubt. The inspection itself is the withdrawal of the creative force. You are like an architect who builds a wall brick by brick, then removes bricks to verify that the wall is solid. The removal is the problem, not the bricks. This is why the spiritual traditions teach unwavering faith, persistent belief, sustained conviction. They are not asking for blind acceptance of unprovable claims. They are explaining the mechanics of creation. The substance responds to sustained assumption and dissolves under doubt. The moment you allow your consciousness to entertain the possibility that your desired reality might not manifest, you have introduced competing instructions to the substance. You are simultaneously telling it to form into wealth and remain as poverty, to shape into health and maintain disease, to build success and perpetuate failure. The substance, receiving contradictory commands, produces mixed results or delayed results or no results at all. Doubt has another source beyond the checking of progress, the influence of consensus reality. You live in a world where others are creating from their consciousness, shaping reality according to their beliefs, constructing bridges to their destinations. And most of those people are creating from limitation, fear, lack, impossibility. Their collective consciousness creates a field of accepted limitations, a consensus about what is possible and what is not. When you begin to build a bridge that defies this consensus, you encounter resistance not from the substance itself, but from the thought forms, the belief structures, the assumptions of the collective. This manifests as the opinions of others, the statistics that argue against you, the expert testimony that declares your goal unreachable. Family members tell you to be realistic. Friends warn you against disappointment. Authorities present data proving the improbability of your success. And if you lack skill in maintaining your own assumption against contradiction, their doubt becomes your doubt. You absorb their limitations, you accept their consensus, you allow the collective's assumptions to override your individual conviction. The bridge begins to dissolve because you have stopped building it from faith substance and started building it from borrowed fear. The vaccine against doubt is knowing the source of your power. If you believe that your desired reality must come from external sources, must be granted by authorities, must be achieved through conventional means, then doubt will paralyze you. The world will constantly present evidence that these sources are unavailable, these authorities are unsupportive, these means are beyond your reach. But if you know that your consciousness is the source, that your sustained assumption is the authority, that faith substance is the means, then external evidence becomes irrelevant. The world can show you poverty while you build wealth, disease while you construct health, failure while you shape success. Their testimony is about their reality, not yours. Worry is doubt in motion, faith directed toward disaster. When you worry, you are imagining in detail the negative outcome, feeling the emotions associated with failure, rehearsing the experience of loss. You are using the same creative mechanism that builds the ethereal bridge, but you are building a bridge to catastrophe instead of triumph. The worried person is not passive or inactive. They are intensely active, directing enormous creative energy toward manifesting what they fear. And because fear can be as emotionally charged as desire, because anxiety can be as focused as faith, the worried person often succeeds in creating the disaster they anticipated. The antidote to doubt is not positive thinking, but sustained assumption. Positive thinking attempts to counter negative thoughts with positive thoughts, creating a battlefield in consciousness where opposite forces fight for dominance. Sustained assumption bypasses the conflict by making a single decision and maintaining it. The desired reality already exists in substance and is manifesting in matter. This is not affirmation requiring repetition. This is knowing requiring only consistency. You do not argue with doubt. You ignore it through occupying a state of consciousness where doubt is irrelevant. The biblical metaphor of Lot's wife turning to salt captures this perfectly. She is fleeing the destruction of Sodom, moving toward safety, crossing from death to life. But she looks back. The looking back is doubt, the checking to verify the destruction, the need to see what she is leaving behind. And the looking back transforms her. She cannot complete the crossing because she cannot maintain the assumption of forward motion. She must check, must verify, must confirm, and the checking destroys her more completely than the destruction she was fleeing. Looking back takes many forms. It is checking your bank balance while building wealth, checking your symptoms while constructing health, checking others' opinions while creating your success. It is comparing your current circumstances to your desired reality, and using the gap as evidence that faith is failing. It is consulting logic about the probability of your manifestation. It is asking the five senses to confirm what only the sixth sense can perceive. Every time you look back, you withdraw energy from the bridge ahead and direct it toward the reality behind. The construction stops, the dissolution begins, the salt forms. The vacuum of doubt must be filled with something, or it will fill itself with fear. Nature abhors a vacuum, consciousness abhors uncertainty. If you remove doubt without replacing it with sustained assumption, the doubt will return, often more powerful than before. The work is not to fight doubt, but to occupy its space so completely that doubt has nowhere to exist. You fill consciousness with the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the perception of the desired reality, the assumption that what you want already exists in substance and is manifesting in matter. There is no room for doubt in a consciousness fully occupied by faith. This explains why partial faith produces partial results or no results. You cannot be 80% faithful and expect full manifestation. The 20% doubt is not neutral. It is actively creating the opposite of what the 80% faith is building. You are simultaneously constructing and demolishing, building up and tearing down, crossing forward and sliding backward. The result is frustration, delay, or failure. Not because faith doesn't work, but because you are working against yourself, dividing your creative power between opposite outcomes, giving the substance contradictory instructions. The decision required is binary. You are either sustaining the assumption of your desired reality, or you are not. You are either walking on the water, or you are checking to see if it's solid. You are either building the bridge, or you are inspecting its progress. You are either facing forward or looking back. There is no middle ground in creation. You are always creating something. The question is only what you are creating. The desired reality through sustained faith, or the feared reality through active doubt. The substance awaits your instruction. The bridge responds to your conviction. The water becomes stone or remains liquid according to your assumption. Choose faith and maintain it. Let doubt dissolve in the vacuum created by your unwavering conviction that what you desire already exists and is becoming visible. Chapter 7. Faith without works. The statement, "Faith without works is dead," has been weaponized against the understanding of how creation actually operates. It has been interpreted to mean that faith is insufficient, that you must add physical effort to make faith effective. That belief without action produces nothing. This interpretation serves those who want to keep you striving, struggling, efforting your way toward your goals through conventional means. But the statement means something entirely different when understood through the mechanics of faith substance. Work is not what makes faith effective. Work is what faith naturally produces when it is operating correctly. The conventional model places work as the cause and results as the effect. You work hard, therefore you succeed. You take action, therefore you achieve. You labor, therefore you earn. This model keeps you trapped in the dimension of physical effort, measuring your potential by your physical capacity, limiting your results to what you can accomplish through biological energy and time. You become a machine measuring input against output, calculating how much effort is required to produce how much result. And because there are only 24 hours in a day and only so much energy in your body, your results are capped by these physical limitations. The faith-based model reverses the sequence entirely. Faith produces a state of consciousness. The state of consciousness produces natural action. The natural action produces inevitable results. Notice that work is still present in this model, but it is not the cause of results. It is the bridge between consciousness and manifestation, the physical expression of an internal reality, the automatic behavior that emerges from occupying the desired state. The person who has faith in wealth does not work to become wealthy. They work because they are wealthy, and their work reflects their wealth consciousness. This distinction is crucial. When you operate from lack consciousness, your work is desperate, strained, anxiety-driven. You hustle because you need the money. You push because you fear failure. You strive because you feel insufficient. This quality of work rarely produces the desired results because the consciousness behind it is creating lack, even while the hands are laboring. You are building a bridge to poverty through desperate action, constructing lack through fear-based effort, manifesting insufficiency through need-driven work. The work is not the problem. The consciousness from which the work flows is the problem. When you operate from wealth consciousness, from the sustained assumption that you are wealthy in the realm of substance, your work changes quality entirely. You act from abundance, not toward it. You create from sufficiency, not toward it. You labor from freedom, not toward it. The actions that emerge from this consciousness are inspired rather than forced, natural rather than strained, effective rather than desperate. You do not need to figure out what to do. The right actions occur to you spontaneously because you are occupying the state where those actions are natural. The consciousness produces the action automatically. This is what faith without works is dead actually means. If your faith is genuine, if you truly occupy the desired state, works will automatically emerge. The absence of natural action indicates the absence of genuine faith. You cannot truly be wealthy in consciousness and sit paralyzed, unable to act. The wealthy consciousness naturally expresses itself in wealthy behavior. You cannot truly be healthy in consciousness and behave in ways that destroy health. The healthy consciousness naturally produces healthy choices. The works are the proof that the faith is real, not the thing that makes the faith effective. Consider the difference between inspired action and forced action. Forced action comes from the belief that you must make it happen, that the results depend on your effort, that you are responsible for closing the gap between current reality and desired reality through your physical labor. This creates the grinding, exhausting, often ineffective hustle that burns people out and produces mediocre results. You are trying to move the mountain with your hands, to build the bridge with your bare strength, to cross the abyss through sheer physical effort. It is possible to make progress this way, but it is slow, difficult, and limited by your physical capacity. Inspired action comes from the recognition that you are already in possession of your desired reality in the dimension of substance. The action that flows from this recognition is not about making it happen but allowing it to happen, not forcing the manifestation but cooperating with it, not creating the bridge but walking on the bridge that faith has already constructed. The actions are still yours to take, the decisions are still yours to make, the steps are still yours to walk, but they come naturally, easily, obviously. You are not figuring out what to do. You are doing what occurs to you, what feels right, what presents itself as the next natural step. The person who has faith in wealth does not need a business plan. The right actions present themselves at the right time. Opportunities appear, connections form, ideas emerge. They take action, but the action feels effortless because it flows from the consciousness of already being wealthy. They are not climbing toward wealth. They are expressing wealth. The work they do is not the means to become wealthy, but the natural behavior of someone who is wealthy. The universe does not reward their hard work with money. The universe reflects their wealth consciousness through their work producing monetary results. This explains why two people can take identical actions and get completely different results. One is acting from lack, trying to become wealthy, straining to close the gap. The other is acting from abundance, expressing wealth, walking from the assumed state. The physical actions may look the same to an outside observer, but the consciousness behind the actions is completely different. And because consciousness is the creative force, because substance responds to inner state, not outer behavior, the results are completely different. One person's hard work produces minimal results. The other person's natural action produces abundant results. Same work, different consciousness, opposite outcomes. The trap is believing that you must force yourself to act before you feel like acting. This produces actions that contradict your actual state of consciousness, behaviors that express lack while trying to produce abundance, work that reinforces the very reality you are trying to escape. You go to a job you hate because you need the money. Every moment at that job is an affirmation of lack, a statement that you need this income, that you are insufficient, that you must labor to survive. The work may produce money, but it cannot produce wealth because the consciousness behind it is poverty. The correct sequence is to occupy the desired state first, to sustain the assumption of already being what you wish to become, to dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. From this state, actions will emerge naturally. You will be moved to act, prompted to decide, inspired to move. These actions will feel right, because they are expressions of your actual state, manifestations of your assumed reality, physical behaviors that match your consciousness, and because they match your consciousness, they will produce results that match your consciousness. Your work will produce wealth because it flows from wealth consciousness. This does not mean you sit passively waiting for the universe to deliver your desires while you take no action. Passivity is often just fear masquerading as faith, resistance dressed up as surrender, paralysis pretending to be trust. True faith produces movement, generates action, inspires behavior. But the action is natural, not forced. It is the movement of someone walking across a bridge they know is there, not someone flailing in a void they fear is empty. The work that emerges from faith is confident, purposeful, and effective, precisely because it is not desperate, strained, or anxiety-driven. The scripture is correct. Faith without works is dead, but the works must flow from the faith, not be added to the faith. The works must express the internal reality, not attempt to create the external reality. You do not work to make faith effective. You work because faith is effective, because the state you occupy naturally produces certain behaviors, because being wealthy naturally generates wealthy actions, because occupying health naturally produces healthy choices, because assuming success naturally creates successful decisions. The works are the evidence that you truly inhabit the desired state, the confirmation that your faith is genuine, the physical expression of your internal reality. Stop trying to figure out what you should do. Start occupying the state of already having what you desire. From that state you will know what to do. The knowing will not come as a detailed plan or a complete roadmap. It will come as the next obvious step, the action that presents itself now, the decision that feels right in this moment. Take that step, do what occurs to you. Act from the assumption that you already are what you wish to become. The works will be there, not as prerequisites for results, but as expressions of the state that produces results. Faith is the consciousness. Works are the behavior. Results are the manifestation. All three are inseparable aspects of the same creative process. Change the consciousness and the behavior and results change automatically. This is the mechanics of faith without works is dead. True faith is never without works. True faith produces works automatically. True faith makes works inevitable, natural, and effective. Chapter 8. The Evidence of Things Not Seen. Human civilization is built on the demand for evidence before commitment. You want proof before you believe, confirmation before you trust, demonstration before you accept. This is reasonable in the physical dimension, where con artists and deception are real threats. But this same demand becomes the barrier that prevents you from accessing the creative mechanism where the ethereal bridge is constructed. The realm of substance operates on the opposite principle. Commitment produces evidence, belief generates proof, acceptance manifests demonstration. The evidence follows faith, it does not precede it. The phrase, evidence of things not seen, is not a paradox, but a precise description of how creation operates. The evidence exists, but it exists in a dimension your physical senses cannot access. It is evidence in the realm of substance, proof in the frequency of prematter, confirmation in the fourth dimensional space where creation is forming. Your sixth sense, faith, can detect this evidence clearly. The problem is that you have been trained to trust only evidence that the five physical senses can verify, to accept only proof that appears in the three-dimensional world. You are demanding visible evidence of an invisible reality, physical confirmation of a metaphysical truth. Consider how this demand paralyzes creation. You want to build wealth, but you need to see money before you will feel wealthy. You want to experience health, but you need to see symptoms disappear before you will feel healthy. You want to achieve success, but you need to see results before you will feel successful. In every case, you are waiting for the three-dimensional evidence, before you will occupy the four-dimensional state. But the mechanism operates in reverse. You must occupy the state first, and the evidence manifests second. The internal reality must precede the external confirmation. The master understands that the imaginal act is the evidence. When they hold an image in consciousness, feel the reality of it, dwell in the assumption of its completion, they are experiencing the evidence that exists in the dimension of substance. This is not make-believe or fantasy. This is perception of a higher reality, detection of an actual pattern that exists in the field of infinite potential, observation of a truth that has not yet condensed into matter, but exists just as surely as matter exists. The imaginal act is the receipt. The physical manifestation is merely the delivery. This requires a complete reversal of your relationship to evidence. You must learn to treat internal evidence as superior to external evidence, to value the testimony of your sixth sense above the testimony of your five physical senses, to trust what you perceive through faith more than what you observe through eyes and hands. This feels dangerous because you have been conditioned to believe that only the physical is real, that only the visible can be trusted, that only the measurable exists. But this conditioning is what keeps you imprisoned in the already manifested, unable to create anything genuinely new. The world screams for proof. Show me the money, display the credentials, produce the results, demonstrate the success. And if you cannot show it, if you cannot display it, if you cannot produce it, the world declares that it does not exist. The crowd is convinced that seeing is believing, but the truth is exactly opposite. Believing is seeing. You must believe it exists in substance before you will see it exist in matter. You must have faith in the invisible before it becomes visible. You must trust the evidence that only your sixth sense can detect before the five senses will confirm it. This is where most people abandon the crossing. They build the bridge through sustained assumption, shape the substance through faith, begin the manifestation process through conviction, and then they check for evidence. They look at their bank account expecting to see wealth. They examine their body expecting to see health. They survey their circumstances expecting to see success. And when they see none of these things, when the three-dimensional world has not yet reflected the four-dimensional reality, they conclude that faith has failed. They withdraw their assumption, collapse their conviction, abandon the construction. The bridge dissolves not because it was never there, but because they stopped maintaining the evidence in the dimension where it actually exists. The correct response to the lack of physical evidence is not doubt, but persistence. The absence of external confirmation is not proof that the internal reality is false. It is simply information about the lag time between shaping substance and manifesting matter, between creating in consciousness and observing in circumstances. The airplane exists before it flies. The building exists before it stands. The business exists before it operates. There is always a period between conception and birth, between planting and harvest, between cause and effect. The invisibility is not absence, it is gestation. The person who masters this understanding learns to live from the evidence they possess in consciousness rather than waiting for the evidence they lack in circumstances. They feel wealthy because they hold wealth in imagination. They feel healthy because they perceive health in the realm of substance. They feel successful because they occupy success as an internal state. The feeling is the evidence. The internal state is the proof. The occupied consciousness is the confirmation. They do not need the world to agree with them because they are not checking the world for validation. They are operating from a dimension where the evidence is complete, perfect, and undeniable. This is not denial of current circumstances. You can acknowledge what the physical senses report without treating that report as the final truth. You can recognize that your bank account shows a certain number without accepting that number as the definition of your wealth. You can observe that your body exhibits certain symptoms without concluding that those symptoms define your health. The physical dimension is the trailing indicator, the output of previous consciousness, the manifestation of past assumptions. You are creating new output by establishing new consciousness, building new circumstances by maintaining new assumptions. The paradox is that the evidence exists but is invisible until you stop demanding to see it. The moment you relax your requirement for physical proof, the moment you accept the evidence that exists in the imaginal realm, the moment you trust what your sixth sense perceives, the physical evidence begins to appear. Not because your surrender triggered manifestation, but because your surrender stopped blocking manifestation. You were building the bridge through faith, and then you were tearing it down through demand for proof, then building again through renewed faith, then tearing down again through checking for evidence. The constant construction-destruction cycle prevented completion. When you stop tearing down, when you stop checking, when you maintain the evidence in consciousness, regardless of what appears in circumstances, the bridge solidifies and the crossing becomes visible. The practical method is to cultivate satisfaction with imaginal evidence. When you desire something, create it completely in imagination. See it, feel it, experience it with full sensory detail in the theater of your mind. Let this imaginal act be enough. Let this internal evidence satisfy your requirement for proof. Do not diminish it by treating it as just imagination. Recognize it as the actual creation in the dimension where creation occurs. The physical manifestation will follow, but not because you demanded it, not because you checked for it, not because you required it. The manifestation follows because you held the pattern steady in consciousness long enough for substance to take that shape in matter. Understand that the universe does not respond to your words, your wishes, or your wanting. It responds to your state of consciousness, to the assumption you occupy, to the reality you claim as true. If you claim wealth while feeling poor, you will manifest poverty. If you claim health while feeling sick, you will manifest disease. The words are meaningless. The state is everything. And the state is validated by internal evidence, not external circumstances. You know you are truly wealthy when you feel wealthy regardless of your bank account. You know you are truly healthy when you feel healthy, regardless of symptoms. You know you are truly successful when you feel successful regardless of results. The evidence of things not seen is the evidence that matters most. It is the evidence that exists before manifestation, the proof that precedes demonstration, the confirmation that creates rather than confirms. Learn to value this evidence above all external validation. Learn to trust what you perceive through faith above what you observe through senses. Learn to live from the evidence you hold in consciousness rather than waiting for the evidence that appears in circumstances. The invisible evidence is more real than the visible proof because the invisible is the cause and the visible is the effect. Master the cause and the effect becomes inevitable. Hold the evidence in faith and the manifestation in matter becomes certain. The things not seen are not absent. They are simply waiting for you to stop requiring them to be seen before you will believe they exist. Chapter 9. The God State. At the root of all faith is a question of authority. Who is the source of your reality? If you believe that your circumstances are created by external forces, by other people, by the economy, by fate, by a deity separate from yourself, then you are petitioning for your life, begging for your manifestations, hoping that the powers outside will grant your wishes. But if you understand that you are the operant power, that consciousness is the only creator, that you and the infinite creative force are not two separate entities, but one unified field, then faith becomes not petition, but declaration, not hope, but command, not request, but creation. The statement, "I and the Father are one," is not a religious claim reserved for a single historical figure. It is a metaphysical truth available to all consciousness. The Father, understood not as a bearded authority in the clouds, but as the infinite creative principle, the source from which all reality emerges, is not separate from you. You are not a creation separate from the Creator. You are the Creator localized, the infinite expressing through the particular, the source manifesting as individual consciousness. When you grasp this, faith ceases to be about convincing an external power to grant your request and becomes about recognizing your own authority to command reality. This is the God state, the consciousness that knows itself as source, the awareness that you are not petitioner but provider, not beggar but benefactor, not creation but creator. In this state, there is no one to ask because you are the one who answers. There is no permission to seek because you are the one who grants permission. There is no power to petition because you are the power. This is not arrogance or ego inflation. This is accurate understanding of the mechanism of creation. Consciousness creates. You are consciousness. Therefore you create. The logic is inescapable. The resistance to this understanding is immediate and profound. You have been conditioned from birth to see yourself as small, limited, powerless, dependent. You have been taught that you are at the mercy of circumstances, subject to external authorities, reliant on forces beyond your control. This conditioning serves those who benefit from your powerlessness, but it does not serve truth. The truth is that you have always been creating your reality, unconsciously and automatically, through the assumptions you hold and the states you occupy. The only question is whether you will continue creating unconsciously or begin creating deliberately. When you operate from the God state, faith is not a feeling you must generate, but a knowledge you possess. You do not hope that wealth will appear. You know that wealth must appear because you have decreed it in consciousness. You do not wish for health. You claim health as your natural state because you have occupied it in the dimension of substance. You do not dream of success. You walk in success because you have assumed it as your reality. The certainty comes not from seeing evidence, but from knowing your authority. Not from external confirmation, but from internal conviction. This state is not accessed through religious ritual or spiritual practice, though these may help clear the obstacles to recognizing what is already true. The God state is your natural condition, the baseline consciousness that exists before conditioning, before limitation, before the false belief that you are powerless. Every child begins in this state, naturally creative, automatically manifesting, unconsciously powerful. The conditioning gradually suppresses this natural authority until you believe you must earn permission, prove worthiness, and petition external powers for every desire. Reclaiming the God state requires the deconstruction of false beliefs about your nature. You must recognize that every authority you have ever bowed to, every power you have ever petitioned, every source you have ever begged, was ultimately just consciousness creating reality. The authorities had power only because consciousness gave them power. The circumstances had control only because consciousness granted them control. The limitations had reality only because consciousness accepted them as real. And if consciousness created these authorities, circumstances, and limitations, consciousness can uncreate them. You can because you are consciousness. The practical implications are revolutionary. When you need money, you do not pray to a deity or hope the universe will provide. You claim wealth in consciousness and allow it to manifest through whatever channels present themselves. When you need healing, you do not beg for divine intervention or trust doctors to fix you. You assume health in the dimension of substance and let the physical body reflect that assumption. When you need success, you do not petition fate or work desperately to earn it. You occupy the state of success and watch circumstances rearrange themselves to match your consciousness. This does not mean you ignore practical action or dismiss conventional methods. The God state does not make you impractical. It makes you effective. You still see doctors, but you do not worship them as the source of healing. You still work, but you do not believe work is the source of wealth. You still take action, but you recognize that action is the effect of your state, not the cause of your results. The power is always in consciousness. Everything else is mechanism, channel, means, useful but not ultimate, important but not essential. The test of whether you are operating from the God state is how you respond to obstacles. If you encounter resistance and immediately feel powerless, if you face contradiction and begin to doubt, if you meet opposition and start to petition, you have forgotten your authority. You have reverted to the beggar state, the petitioner consciousness, the belief that external forces determine your reality. But if you encounter resistance and simply reassert your assumption, if you face contradiction and maintain your state, if you meet opposition and reaffirm your authority, you are operating from the God state. The external circumstance has no power to override your internal decree. This is why masters appear unshakable. They are not suppressing fear or pretending to be confident. They genuinely know their authority. When they declare a reality in consciousness, they are not hoping it will manifest or wishing it might appear. They are commanding it to exist, and they know the command must be obeyed because consciousness is the only power, because assumption is the only cause, because the God state is the only creator. The external world can delay manifestation through the lag time between cause and effect, but it cannot prevent manifestation. The decree has been issued. The reality is forming. The manifestation is inevitable. The relationship between prayer and the God state reveals the confusion that pervades most spiritual teaching. Prayer is typically taught as petition. You ask a deity for what you want, hoping to be heard, trusting you might be answered, accepting that you might be denied. This form of prayer reinforces powerlessness, dependence, separation. But prayer understood correctly is declaration. You state what is true in consciousness, you claim what exists in substance, you decree what must manifest in matter. You are not asking, you are announcing. You are not hoping, you are knowing. You are not petitioning, you are commanding. The God state does not make you responsible for other people's realities. You are not creating their experiences, they are. You cannot override their consciousness with your consciousness any more than they can override yours. Each consciousness is sovereign, each awareness is autonomous, each individual is the God of their own reality. You can influence others through your state. People do respond to your consciousness, but you cannot control them. Your authority is over your reality, your experience, your manifestation. Their authority is over theirs. The God state is not tyranny over others, but sovereignty over self. This understanding dissolves the victim consciousness that keeps most people trapped in unwanted realities. If circumstances are created by external forces, you are a victim, powerless to change what is happening to you, dependent on those forces becoming favorable. But if circumstances are created by consciousness, and you are consciousness, then you are never a victim. You are always the creator, even when you are creating unconsciously, even when you are creating what you do not want, even when you are manifesting limitation and pain. The power is always yours. The question is only whether you will use it deliberately or accidentally, consciously or unconsciously, as master or as slave. The authority you possess is not diminished by your past failures, not negated by your current circumstances, not limited by your lack of credentials or your shortage of resources. Your authority comes from being consciousness itself, from being the localized expression of the infinite creative principle, from being I and the Father are one. This authority cannot be earned because it cannot be lost. It cannot be granted because it cannot be taken away. It is inherent, permanent, absolute. You have always had it. You have simply forgotten it, denied it, failed to exercise it. But forgetting your authority does not eliminate it. It only makes you an unconscious creator instead of a conscious one. The God state is not a distant achievement requiring years of spiritual practice. It is your present reality requiring only recognition. You are operating as creator right now, in this moment, through the assumptions you hold and the states you occupy. The question is not whether you will become the operant power, but whether you will recognize that you already are. The Ethereal Bridge is not built by asking permission from authorities or hoping for cosmic support. It is built by knowing your nature as creator, claiming your authority over your reality, and decreeing in consciousness what must manifest in matter. You are not waiting for faith to work. You are the faith. You are not hoping for power to appear. You are the power. You are not petitioning the source. You are the source. This is not poetry, this is mechanics, this is not mysticism, this is truth. You are the operant power. Exercise your authority. Chapter Sucked. The Crossing. There comes a moment in every crossing when the ethereal bridge becomes solid, when the invisible substance suddenly appears as visible matter, when what existed only in faith manifests as undeniable fact. This is the moment of materialization, the point where the fourth dimension precipitates into the third, where pre-matter condenses into matter. It usually happens when you least expect it, often when you have stopped checking for it, frequently when you have become so established in the desired state that you have forgotten you once lacked what you now possess. The crossing is complete when you look back and realize there was never any danger, when you understand the bridge was always there, when you know you were safe the entire time. The manifestation does not happen because you finally accumulated enough faith or performed enough works or petitioned long enough. It happens because the pattern you held in consciousness reached the density required for materialization, because the substance you shaped in imagination achieved the frequency necessary for physical expression, because the assumption you maintained in awareness sustained itself long enough to complete the precipitation process. This is not reward for good behavior or divine blessing for sufficient devotion. This is natural law operating predictably, consciousness creating consistently, cause producing effect inevitably. The timing of manifestation is one of the great mysteries that confuses most seekers. You hold the assumption, feel the reality, dwell in the state, yet nothing appears to change. Days pass, weeks pass, sometimes months pass, and the physical world stubbornly refuses to reflect your internal reality. This delay is the testing ground where most people abandon the crossing. They interpret the delay as evidence that faith is not working, that their assumption is false, that the bridge does not exist, and by abandoning the assumption, they ensure that the manifestation never completes. The delay is not failure, it is process. The lag is not evidence of impossibility, it is the natural interval between cause and effect. Understanding the lag requires understanding the nature of time in the dimension where creation occurs. In the fourth dimensional space, all times exist simultaneously. Your desired reality is not future, it is parallel. It does not need to be created, it already exists. The work of manifestation is not creating something new, but selecting which of the infinite existing realities you will experience. When you assume a state, when you occupy a consciousness, when you dwell in a feeling, you are tuning your awareness to a specific frequency where a specific reality exists. The manifestation is the process of that reality becoming dominant in your experience, of that parallel world replacing the world you currently perceive as primary. The delay occurs because consciousness must shift gradually to prevent the shock of sudden transformation. If your complete assumption could manifest instantly, the abrupt change would be psychologically destabilizing, physically overwhelming, sometimes dangerous. The universe has mercy in its timing. It gives you opportunity to adjust to the new reality, to grow into the person who can handle what you have claimed, to develop the consciousness that can maintain what is manifesting. The delay is preparation, acclimation, protective transition. When the manifestation arrives, you are ready for it, capable of receiving it, able to sustain it. The crossing becomes complete not in a moment, but through a process of gradual solidification. The bridge does not suddenly appear, it progressively materializes. First, you notice small changes, subtle shifts, minor confirmations. Synchronicities occur. Opportunities present themselves. Doors open. These are not coincidences, but evidence that the substance is taking form, that the assumption is manifesting, that the crossing is progressing. Most people dismiss these early signs as meaningless or unrelated to their desired goal. But the master recognizes them as the first planks of the bridge becoming visible, the initial density of substance achieving material expression. As you continue to maintain the assumption, as you persist in the state, as you refuse to abandon the crossing despite the apparent void beneath your feet, the manifestations accelerate and intensify. What began as subtle synchronicities becomes obvious opportunities. What started as minor confirmations becomes major demonstrations. The trickle becomes a stream, the stream becomes a river, the river becomes a flood. And suddenly, though it is not sudden at all but the culmination of sustained assumption, you look around and realize you have crossed. You are standing at point B. The desired reality is your lived experience. The bridge that seemed impossible is beneath your feet, solid and undeniable. The moment of realization is often anticlimactic. You expected trumpets and celebration, drama and excitement. Instead, you simply notice that you are now experiencing as normal what you once desired as extraordinary. The wealth you imagined is your daily reality. The health you claimed is your baseline state. The success you assumed is your actual circumstance. There is no sharp boundary between the crossing and the arrival, no clear moment when the impossible became possible. Instead, there is a gradual recognition that what you held in faith has become what you hold in fact, that what you perceived in the invisible has manifested in the visible, that what you built from substance has solidified into matter. This is why the masters say that when you can feel grateful for what you desire, as though you already possess it, manifestation is complete in consciousness and will soon be complete in circumstances. Gratitude is the emotional signature of having, not wanting, of possessing, not lacking, of being, not becoming. When you can genuinely thank consciousness for wealth before you see money, for health before symptoms disappear, for success before evidence appears, you have occupied the state so completely that the physical manifestation is merely the trailing effect of an already completed cause. You are not hoping it will manifest. You are recognizing that it has manifested in the dimension that matters most. The crossing teaches you something fundamental about reality. The abyss was always an illusion. The impossibility was only in your perception. The bridge was always there, invisible but present, intangible but real, undetectable to physical senses but undeniable to faith. You were never in danger of falling. You were never building something from nothing. You were never creating what did not exist. You were always selecting from what does exist, always perceiving what was already there, always walking on ground that was solid beneath the appearance of void. This realization transforms your relationship to all future desires. Having crossed once, having proven to yourself that the ethereal bridge is real, having demonstrated that substance responds to assumption, you approach new impossibilities with confidence instead of doubt. You stand at new abysses without fear. You face new contradictions between current reality and desired reality without panic. You know the mechanism. You understand the process. You trust the substance. The next crossing is easier because you have internalized the truth. There is always a bridge. Consciousness always creates. Faith always works. The evidence that the crossing is complete is not always dramatic. You do not necessarily receive a windfall that solves all financial concerns at once. You do not always experience a miraculous healing that eliminates all symptoms instantly. You do not always achieve a breakthrough success that transforms your entire life in a day. Sometimes the crossing completes gradually, incrementally, through a series of improvements and adjustments that add up to total transformation. The key is to recognize these incremental manifestations as evidence of your successful crossing, not to dismiss them as insufficient or unrelated to your assumption. Many people cross the abyss but fail to recognize their arrival because they are still looking for the dramatic demonstration they imagined. They wanted to wake up wealthy, to have perfect health overnight, to achieve instant success. When the manifestation comes through natural channels, progressive improvements, incremental advancements, they dismiss it as coincidence or hard work or luck, never realizing they created it through sustained assumption. They completed the crossing but denied themselves the recognition of victory. They built the bridge but refused to acknowledge they were standing on it. The completion of one crossing becomes the beginning point for the next. Point B, once reached, becomes the new point A. The reality you manifested becomes your new baseline from which you can launch toward even greater realities. There is no end to the crossings you can make, no limit to the bridges you can build, no final destination that concludes your creative capacity. Each manifestation proves the principle and prepares you for larger demonstrations. Each crossing strengthens your faith and develops your skill. Each arrival at a destination becomes a departure point for a greater journey. The person who has crossed once becomes addicted to crossing, not because they are greedy or insatiable, but because they have tasted the truth of their creative nature, experienced the thrill of conscious manifestation, proven to themselves that they are indeed the operant power. They can never return to the victim consciousness that believes circumstances are fixed, reality is given, limitation is inevitable. They have seen behind the curtain. They have learned the mechanism. They have discovered their authority. And having discovered it, they cannot unknow it, cannot unsee it, cannot return to powerlessness. The ultimate realization of the crossing is that there was never a crossing at all. Point A and point B exist simultaneously. You do not travel from one to the other. You shift your awareness from one to the other. The bridge is not something you build in space. It is something you recognize in consciousness. You were always at point B. You were always wealthy, always healthy, always successful in the parallel reality, where these states are your experience. The crossing is not creating a new reality, but selecting which reality you perceive as primary. You are not changing the world. You are changing worlds. You are not manifesting what was absent. You are revealing what was always present. Stand at point B now. Look back at point A. See the abyss you crossed. Notice the ethereal bridge beneath your feet. Recognize that it was always there, solid and reliable, invisible but real, responsive to faith and indifferent to doubt. You did not create it. You discovered it. You did not build it. You walked it. You did not make the impossible possible. You recognize that impossibility was the illusion. The crossing is complete. The manifestation is solid. The bridge has done its work. You are here. You were always going to be here. The only question was whether you would trust the substance enough to take the step, maintain the assumption enough to complete the crossing, and recognize your arrival when you achieved it. Welcome to point B. Welcome to your desired reality. Welcome to the destination you claimed in consciousness before it manifested in matter. The crossing is complete. The bridge is real. The faith has worked. Epilogue. The invisible ground. You have learned the mechanics of the ethereal bridge, studied the substance of faith, practiced the art of sustained assumption. But beneath all techniques and principles lies a fundamental truth about the nature of reality itself. Everything is consciousness, and consciousness is everything. The ground you stand on, which appears solid and separate from you, is condensed energy held together by invisible laws. The atoms are mostly empty space. The forces are non-physical fields. The solidity is an illusion created by frequency, density, and your sensory interpretation. You are not standing on something separate from consciousness. You are standing on consciousness itself, on mind made visible, on thought made dense. This means you can build new ground anywhere. You can create solid footing where none appears to exist. You can establish a foundation in what looks like empty air. The substance is always available because substance is consciousness, and consciousness is everywhere, everywhen, eternally present. You do not need permission from the material world to create in the material world, because the material world is not material at all. It is consciousness vibrating at frequencies your senses interpret as matter. Change the consciousness, and you change the matter. Alter the vibration, and you alter the form. Shift the assumption, and you shift the reality. The ethereal bridge is not a special case or an exception to natural law. It is natural law, the most fundamental principle of existence. Consciousness creates reality through the assumptions it holds, the states it occupies, the patterns it sustains. Every bridge you have ever crossed in the physical world was first built in the invisible world. Every structure you have ever entered was first designed in consciousness. Every reality you have ever experienced was first selected from the infinite field of possibility through the focus of awareness, the direction of attention, the occupation of a state. You have always been building bridges. You are simply learning to build them consciously, deliberately, toward destinations of your choosing. The instruction is simple but demands everything. Build the bridge with your mind and walk it with your feet. Hold the pattern in consciousness until it solidifies in circumstance. Maintain the assumption until it manifests in matter. Occupy the state until it produces the corresponding reality. Do not check to see if it is working. Do not test to verify it is solid. Do not look back to confirm you have left the shore. Face forward. Look at the horizon. See the destination. Feel yourself already there. Walk as someone who knows the bridge is beneath them, even when their eyes report only air. The invisible ground is more reliable than the visible ground because the invisible is the cause and the visible is the effect. The physical earth beneath your feet can shift, crack, collapse. But consciousness, properly directed, creates new ground, instantly, continuously, infinitely. You are never without foundation unless you believe you are, never without support unless you assume you are, never unable to cross unless you decide you are. The limitation is always in consciousness, never in circumstance. The impossibility is always in assumption, never in actuality. The abyss is always in perception, never in reality. When you understand this deeply, permanently, irreversibly, you become dangerous to the consensus reality that insists you are small, limited, powerless, dependent. You become a threat to the systems that profit from your ignorance of your creative nature. You become ungovernable by external authorities because you recognize that you are your own authority, that consciousness is your throne, that assumption is your decree. They can control your circumstances only if you grant them that power through your assumptions. They can limit your reality only if you accept their limitations through your beliefs. They can keep you imprisoned only if you agree to remain in the cage. This is why the knowledge of the ethereal bridge has been hidden, suppressed, encoded in religious texts that most people misinterpret, presented in spiritual teachings that most people dismiss as metaphorical. Those who understand this principle become creators instead of consumers, masters instead of slaves, sovereign instead of subjects. The entire structure of society depends on people believing they are powerless, accepting that circumstances control them, remaining ignorant of their nature as consciousness capable of creating reality through sustained assumption. The ethereal bridge is not just a personal tool, it is a revolutionary principle. It is liberation technology. Use this knowledge with wisdom. The substance responds to assumption without judgment, creates whatever pattern you hold without questioning whether it serves you. You can build bridges to poverty as easily as to wealth, to disease as easily as to health, to suffering as easily as to joy. The mechanism is neutral. The power is impartial. You are responsible for what you create through the assumptions you maintain, the states you occupy, the realities you claim. There is no external force to blame when you manifest what you do not want. There is only consciousness creating according to its own patterns, substance responding to its own commands, reality reflecting its own assumptions. The final instruction is to step out. Stop waiting for permission, confirmation, or ideal conditions. Stop requiring proof before you believe, evidence before you commit, manifestation before you assume. The bridge will never be visible before you step onto it. The proof will never appear before you claim the reality. The evidence will never manifest before you occupy the state. This is the mechanism. This is the law. This is the way reality operates. You must step out into apparent nothing, knowing it is something. Trusting it will hold you, maintaining the assumption that you are walking on solid ground. Do not look down. When you look down, you are checking to see if the bridge is there, testing to verify it is solid, confirming whether faith is working. And the checking is the doubt that dissolves the substance, the testing is the withdrawal of the creative force, the confirming is the collapse of the assumption. Keep your eyes on the horizon, focus on the destination, see point B clearly, and walk toward it with the confidence of someone who knows the path is solid beneath their feet. The bridge forms under your footfall. The ground materializes at your step. The substance responds to your conviction. You have everything you need. You have consciousness, which is the creative force. You have imagination, which is the workshop where reality is designed. You have assumption, which is the command that substance obeys. You have faith, which is the sense that detects the invisible. You have authority, which comes from being consciousness itself, from being the localized expression of the infinite creative principle. You are not lacking tools. You are not missing information. You are not awaiting external support. You have always possessed everything necessary to cross any abyss, build any bridge, manifest any reality. The only question is whether you will use what you possess. The only uncertainty is whether you will step out. The only doubt is whether you will trust your own authority enough to command reality, sustain your own assumption long enough to manifest it, maintain your own state consistently enough to experience it. The external world will argue against you. Logic will present evidence of impossibility. The crowd will declare you foolish, Authorities will insist you are deluded. Let them. Their opinion is their reality, not yours. Their limitation is their experience, not yours. Their impossibility is their assumption, not yours. Build the bridge with your mind. Walk it with your feet. Look at the horizon. Step out. Do not look down. Trust the substance. Maintain the assumption. Occupy the state. The bridge is forming beneath you. The ground is solid under your feet. The crossing is happening now. You are not hoping to arrive at point B. You are not trying to reach the destination. You are walking from the assumption that you have already arrived, that you already possess what you desire, that you already are what you wish to become. This is not self-deception. This is the mechanism of creation. This is how consciousness produces reality. This is how the invisible becomes visible. You are not reading an instruction manual for a technique you might try someday. You are receiving a description of the mechanism you have always been using, unconsciously and automatically, to create every reality you have ever experienced. The only difference between your current life and your desired life is the assumption you have maintained. Change the assumption, and you change the life. Shift the state, and you shift the reality. Alter the consciousness, and you alter the circumstance. The power has always been yours. The authority has never been elsewhere. The creative force has always been consciousness, and you are consciousness. The ethereal bridge is real. The substance is present. The mechanism is reliable. The crossing is possible. The destination is accessible. The manifestation is inevitable. These are not motivational statements or spiritual platitudes. These are descriptions of how reality operates, how consciousness creates, how the invisible becomes visible. Trust them not because I say them, but because you prove them through your own experience, through your own crossings, through your own manifestations. Build your bridge, walk your path, cross your abyss. The ground is there. It has always been there. It is consciousness itself waiting for your footfall, responsive to your assumption, solid beneath your conviction. Step out. The invisible ground will hold you. It has never failed anyone who trusted it completely.